I officially hate the Yellowjackets. Bum bum bum. I know, strong statement, but hear me out. I just finished season 3, episode 4, and this was supposed to be a very different video. But after watching the trial of Coach Ben, I couldn't shake it. This was my breaking point. Up until now, I could at least understand their choices. Jackie was already dead. Javi, for sake of argument, even though I still don't agree with it, it was winter and they were starving. But now, it's spring. They have food, they have resources, and there is no excuse left. This is not survival anymore. This is not desperation anymore. This is about power. It's about control. And that's when I realized I don't just hate what they've become, I hate how real it feels. Because this could happen to any of us, God forbid. The show Yellowjackets has been masterfully blurring the lines between psychological breakdowns and supernatural horror. But I don't think there's anything supernatural happening here. What's happening to Lottie, Ty, and the others is trauma. It's mass hysteria. It's fear taking over, and that, my friends, that's way scarier than any ghost story. So today, let's break it down. Why this isn't supernatural, why it's all in their heads essentially, and why Coach Ben's trial proves the Yellowjackets have gone way too far. So without further ado, let's get into it. But before we dive into the fun stuff, let's talk about what's actually happening in Yellowjackets. A high school girls' soccer team is on their way to the Nationals when their plane crashes deep in the Canadian wilderness. No rescue, no help, just hunger, the freezing cold, and their own unraveling minds. And at first, it truly was just about survival. They find an abandoned cabin with a mysterious dead body in the attic and strange symbols carved into trees. But then, they start losing it. Lottie starts having visions. Ty starts sleepwalking, seeing a faceless man. Misty, who's already unhinged, obsessive, and manipulative, takes control over their medical situations. Shauna, secretly pregnant, struggles with grief, guilt, and survival instincts. And then, in a situation that is already extremely tragic, comes the turning point, Jackie's death. She freezes overnight after an argument with Shauna, and when the hunger becomes unbearable, they eat her. That moment was shocking, but at least it made some kind of sense. It was survival. But then, things spiral. Shauna's baby doesn't make it. Lottie gains more power. Rituals start, sacrifices start. Then, Javi happens. He returns after being missing for weeks. He's weak, starving, and alive. And they kill him anyway. They convince themselves the wilderness chose him. And now, season 3, the snow is gone, the food is there, and yet they still need someone to punish, someone to blame. They put Coach Ben on trial, and that's when I knew this was never about survival, or at least it wasn't that anymore. It was about power.
By majority decision, we find you, Coach Scott, guilty of attempted murder.
Now, I've seen a lot of people still believe something supernatural is happening in the Yellowjackets. They look at the symbols, the visions, the rituals, and they think the wilderness is real. But let's be honest, there's a much scarier explanation, and it's not ghosts, it's not a curse, it's how the human breaks down under pressure. Because history proves that when people are pushed to the edge, they don't need supernatural forces. They just need fear. Look at the Salem witch trials in 1692. 20 people executed, not because they were witches, but because mass paranoia made the impossible feel real.
Historians have been trying ever since to explain these terrible events. This started with 2 young girls being sick at the house of a minister. People have wondered whether the girls were psychotic. Were they lying? Did they make the whole thing up?
It's retained this status as a sort of almost archetypal witch hunt, in part because it was extraordinary and it was extreme and it happened so rapidly. It provided this really vivid example of how witch hunts can snowball and how, on the basis of some slightly strange behaviour from 2 adolescent girls, hundreds of people can be accused and a proportion of them can be executed.
Look at the dancing plague, an entire town dancing themselves to death with no logical explanation.
Strasbourg doctors tried to figure out the cause of the deadly dance, but with no luck. The residents naturally blamed everything on supernatural forces.
Look at the West Bank fainting epidemic of 1983. Over 900 girls fainting in schools with no medical cause. Now, when fear spreads, it overrides logic. It creates its own reality, and that's exactly what's happening in Yellowjackets. Lottie starts having visions. Ty starts losing control of herself, and instead of questioning it, the others fall in line. They don't stop to think. They don't stop to ask if any of this is real, because once belief takes over, it doesn't matter if it's true. It just matters that they believe it. And that brings us to the trial of Coach Ben. This was the moment I lost all sympathy for the Yellowjackets. Jackie was already dead. Javi, at the very least, was an act of desperate survival. But Coach Ben, there was no excuse. They weren't starving, they weren't freezing, they had food, water, and shelter, but they needed a scapegoat.
Well, that sounds a lot to me like reasonable doubt. I mean, if it could have been any one of us, then is it fair to convict a man of attempted murder?
No, it's not.
Because the second someone questions the wilderness, the second someone doesn't play along, they become the enemy. And Ben, he was the last tether to reality. He was the last person saying, this isn't normal, this isn't necessary. That made him dangerous. That's why they put him on trial. But let's be clear right away, this was never a real trial. This was a warning to anyone who dared step out of line. They didn't care if he was guilty, they had already made up their minds. Shauna blamed him for her baby's death. Ty framed him as the real reason they suffered. Misty tried to defend him, but she knew it was over. And Nat, the only person who might have saved him, she caved because she knew what would happen if she didn't. The second that vote was cast, Ben was as good as dead. And if you still think the wilderness is real, ask yourself this: would it have chosen Ben if he followed Lottie? Would it have marked him if he had obeyed? Or was he just the last loose end? Now for me, what makes Yellowjackets so terrifying isn't the cold or the hunger. It's how quickly they abandoned reason. They don't worship God or fate or even luck. They worship fear, and fear needs a leader. That's where Lottie comes in. She wasn't always in control. At first, she was just another survivor, scared like the rest of them. But when her predictions started coming true, something changed. She stopped being scared. She started believing, and once people believed in her, she had power. It started with small things, a gut feeling, a lucky guess, a ritual that made people feel safe. But soon, it wasn't optional anymore. If you didn't believe, you were against them. That's why Ben had to go. It wasn't about him, it was about sending a message. And Ty, she's supposed to be the logical one, but even she couldn't fight it. She tried to resist, she didn't want to believe, but the second Van convinced her that other Ty knew things, she stopped questioning. She started playing along. She led the hunt for Javi. She ensured Ben was found guilty. She told herself she was making the tough choices, but in reality, she was just as scared as everyone else. Then there's Misty. Misty doesn't believe in any of it. She never did. And that's what makes her so terrifying. Because she helps anyway. She makes sure things run smoothly. She covers up the ugly parts. She kills when she has to. Because as long as she's useful, she'll never be the one on trial.
Look at what you just did. Do you feel that right now? That's fucking power.
And the truth is, there was never a wilderness. They created their own mythology. They built their own rules. They decided who lived and died. And even when they were rescued, they never let it go. Because how do you go back to normal after that? How do you just pretend none of it happened? You don't. And that's what makes this show so terrifying. It's not about ghosts, it's not about spirits, it's about what people are willing to do when they think there are no consequences. And in the wilderness, they learned there weren't any. And that is it for today, my friends. And I need to be clear, I don't hate the show. I actually really, really like the show. I just hate all the girls right now. And hate is a really strong word. I just don't like any of their characters right now. I want to know what you guys think. Do you still think something supernatural is happening? Or do you, like me, think this is just what happens when people break? Because honestly, the fact that they could have stopped but didn't is what makes this show truly horrifying. So yeah, please let me know your comments down below. I would love to hear it. Maybe I'm wrong in something, maybe I'm right, I don't know, let me know. And of course, I want to thank everyone who took the time of day to watch or listen to this video. If you enjoy this type of content, please be sure to like and subscribe. And now remember, the important thing is to always keep questioning. Even me. Till next time.